The morning air at Norfolk Naval Base carried the faint tang of salt and diesel, the scent of ships, engines, and the sea. The base stretched across the waterfront like a steel city, alive with the buzz of motion. Sailors shouting orders, forklifts beeping, and waves slapping rhythmically against the docks. The American flag flapped high above, sharp against a clear Virginia sky. Into this organized chaos walked Catherine Hall, not in the crisp, decorated uniform of an admiral, but in a plain khaki jacket, her rank insignia hidden. To the eye, she looked like a regular officer, perhaps a logistics manager or administrative aide. That was precisely her intention. She had returned to the States after 15 years overseas, serving in hot zones and disaster relief missions across the globe. Her name carried quiet weight in military circles, not for politics or glory, but for her calm command in crisis and her reputation for integrity. But fame meant little to her. What mattered was truth, the raw, unfiltered culture beneath the surface of a command. Catherine believed leadership wasn't about medals or speeches. It was about how people behaved when they thought no one important was watching. And so, on that Tuesday morning, she stepped into the heart of her new command unannounced, to see it for herself, before ceremony or salutes could hide reality. The base was alive with its usual rhythm, but something about the atmosphere struck her. A touch of arrogance, a looseness in discipline. Soldiers laughed loudly, boots unpolished, a few cutting corners during inspection routines. She noted these details silently, every gesture painting a picture. When she entered the mess hall, the first place she always visited at any post, the smell of coffee and fried eggs greeted her. Tables were packed, conversation loud. Groups of enlisted soldiers were laughing, teasing, tossing napkins at each other. A radio played country music somewhere in the background. The energy was youthful, but unrestrained, too casual for her liking. She grabbed a tray and joined the line like anyone else. A few men glanced at her, curious but indifferent. She was just another officer to them. No one recognized the steely eyes that had commanded fleets across foreign waters. At a corner table, Sergeant Lucas Trent sat with 3 others. He was in his late 20s, tall, strong, and loud, the kind of soldier who believed his charm could excuse anything. His voice carried across the room as he joked, mocked, and bragged about last weekend's brawl at a local bar. The others laughed, slapping the table. Lucas had potential. Catherine could tell from one glance, sharp posture, confident stride, but it was buried beneath layers of immaturity and ego. She had seen his type countless times, soldiers who mistook camaraderie for mockery and leadership for dominance. Catherine sat 2 tables away, quietly sipping coffee and eating eggs. She observed, not judging yet, only watching. A true commander, she believed, listened before speaking. But then, as fate would have it, Lucas noticed her. "Hey, new face," he said loudly enough for half the cafeteria to hear. "Haven't seen you around. You new here?" Catherine looked up, her expression calm. "Just arrived," she said evenly. Lucas grinned. "Welcome to the finest circus on the East Coast," he joked, and his friends burst out laughing. She gave a faint smile and turned back to her food, uninterested in the game. That only encouraged him. "She looks like she came straight out of the academy," one of his buddies whispered, snickering. Lucas smirked. "Bet she's one of those rule sticklers." Catherine ignored them. She had learned long ago that silence often revealed character faster than confrontation. But the group wasn't finished. They were bored, restless, looking for amusement. When Catherine stood to return her tray, she passed near their table. Lucas's friend nudged him with a mischievous grin. "Come on, Trent. Make the new one jump. You're the king of pranks." Lucas hesitated for a moment. Then, caught between pride and peer pressure, picked up his cup of steaming hot milk. He didn't plan to hurt her, just startle her, make the boys laugh. That's all it was to him. Harmless fun. He tilted the cup, flicking the milk toward her shoulder. The white splash hit her uniform and ran down her sleeve, staining it. The cafeteria went dead silent. Every sound, the laughter, the radio, the clatter of trays, vanished into stillness. All eyes turned toward the woman standing motionless, her jacket soaked. Lucas froze mid-laugh, realizing too late what he'd done. Catherine slowly turned her head toward him. Her gaze wasn't angry. It was colder than anger, calm, dissecting, heavy with authority. There was something in those eyes that made even the most confident man feel small. Lucas opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. He stammered, "It was a joke, ma'am." "Just a joke." Catherine studied him for 2 seconds more, then set her tray down on the nearest table, wiped her sleeve with a napkin, and said quietly, "Enjoy your breakfast, Sergeant." She walked away without another word. No shouting, no threats, just silence. But it was the kind of silence that carried weight, a storm waiting just beyond the horizon. Lucas's friends looked at him, their laughter dying. One whispered, "Dude, who is she?" Lucas forced a shaky laugh. "Relax. Probably some admin officer. She'd forget about it by lunch." But his voice betrayed the tremor beneath. Across the hall, Catherine left the cafeteria and stepped into the morning light. She didn't head straight to the command office. Instead, she stood by the pier, watching the gray waves slap against the ships. Her sleeve still smelled faintly of milk. She took a deep breath. Years in command had taught her not to react to disrespect with impulse. Real authority didn't shout. It revealed itself through presence. And soon, very soon, she would reveal herself. Behind her, 2 junior officers hurried up. "Ma'am, the ceremony for your official introduction is set for tomorrow morning at 800 hours, one reported. Catherine turned, her expression unreadable. "Good," she said softly. "Make sure all enlisted personnel are present. I'd like to see every face." The officers nodded and left. For a moment, Catherine stood alone again, gazing out at the sea, her reflection rippling on the water's surface. She thought about the soldier's face, the laughter, the arrogance. She had seen it before, the danger that began not with disobedience, but with disrespect. This command would need more than rules. It would need a reminder. As the sun began to sink behind the horizon, painting the sky with gold, Catherine walked back toward her quarters, her steps steady and deliberate. Every soldier she passed saluted her out of habit, not knowing yet that the woman they greeted casually would soon be Admiral Catherine Hawley, their new commander. And tomorrow, when she stood before them in full uniform, medals glinting under the flag, there would be no laughter, only realization. For now, the base slept in ignorance. But dawn was coming. The next morning dawned bright over Norfolk Base, but for Sergeant Lucas Trent, it felt like any other day. He woke late, skipped his shave, and laughed at his reflection in the mirror. "Still handsome," he muttered, winking at himself before grabbing his cap. He didn't think about the woman from yesterday, the one with the calm eyes and the milk-stained sleeve. She was just another officer, probably transferred somewhere else by now. The base was full of new faces all the time. He had no reason to care. But around him, the base had already started to shift, ever so slightly. In the command building, behind closed doors, Admiral Catherine Hall sat across from Colonel Reeves, the base's executive officer. The blinds were drawn. She was no longer in plain clothes. Her crisp navy uniform gleamed, the silver star of her rank catching the light. "I'd like to observe the base today. No announcements yet," she said, her voice calm but firm. Reeves nodded, uneasy. "Yes, ma'am." "Of course." Catherine's tone softened. "I don't want to disrupt the men's rhythm. But I do want to understand the discipline culture here. How they treat one another when they think they're unseen." Her eyes flickered for a moment, not with anger, but reflection. Sometimes the smallest moments show the biggest truths. Reeves didn't ask what she meant. He simply nodded again, a bead of sweat sliding down his temple. By noon, the mess hall was crowded again. The same noise, the same laughter, the same smell of coffee and oil. Lucas sat with his usual crew, Corporal Dean, Private Rizzo, and Specialist Carter. They'd become a small pack of mischief, inseparable, and always teetering between fun and trouble. Rizzo nudged Lucas. "Heard we got some big brass coming tomorrow," he said with a grin. Lucas shrugged. "Yeah, happens every few months. They'll give a speech, shake hands, and vanish. Same old." Dean smirked. "Maybe we should practice behaving." Carter snorted. "You? Behave? The day you salute without laughing, pigs will fly." Their laughter filled the table again, loud and careless. Just as Lucas raised his cup, his gaze flickered to the door and froze. She was there. Catherine Hall, in the same simple jacket, stepped quietly into the cafeteria. Her face calm, her walk measured. It was the same woman, no doubt about it. Lucas's stomach twisted. For a split second, guilt flickered through him. But then Rizzo elbowed him with a grin. "Hey, look, it's your new friend." The others laughed. "You going to apologize?" Carter teased. Lucas hesitated, eyes following Catherine as she walked to a corner table. "Nah," he muttered. "It was just a joke. She's fine." Dean leaned in, smirking. "You sure she didn't report you?" Lucas waved him off. "Come on. She's not that type. Probably doesn't even remember." But deep down, something in him knew better. The memory of her eyes, that quiet, unshakable stare, hadn't left him since yesterday. Catherine sat alone, eating quietly. Her back was straight, her movements composed. She didn't look around, didn't speak, didn't react to the whispers and stares. She was a ghost in a room full of noise. The silence made Lucas restless. He needed to prove, mostly to himself, that he wasn't scared. So when Carter whispered, "Bet you won't do it again," Lucas laughed, but it sounded forced. "What? Spill milk?" "Yeah," Dean said with a grin. "Show her you're not afraid of some officer. She's probably a supply clerk or something." Lucas stared at the cup in his hand, steaming hot milk, just like yesterday. The air around him seemed to tighten. He didn't really want to. Something deep inside warned him to stop. But pride is a dangerous thing, especially in front of an audience. He stood, pretending to stretch. "Fine, watch this." He walked toward her slowly, every step echoing against the tile floor. The cafeteria buzz faded, soldiers pausing mid-bite to see what was happening. Catherine looked up just as he reached her table. Her expression was unreadable, a calm sea hiding deep currents. Lucas smirked, trying to play it cool. "You missed a spot from yesterday," he said, lifting his cup. And before anyone could stop him, he tilted the mug. The milk splashed across her sleeve again, hot and white against the fabric. A collective gasp tore through the room. The noise stopped instantly. Every soldier stared, mouths open, hearts frozen. Lucas's smirk vanished. The moment the liquid hit her, he realized how wrong it felt. Not funny, not brave, just wrong. Catherine didn't flinch. Slowly, she set down her fork, picked up a napkin, and dabbed her sleeve. Her calm was chilling. She looked at him, not in anger, but in profound disappointment, as if she were watching someone throw away their own dignity. "Sergeant," she said softly. Her voice wasn't raised. It didn't need to be. Lucas swallowed hard. "Ma'am, she stood." The room felt smaller suddenly, suffocating. "You find joy in humiliation?" she asked quietly. He opened his mouth, but no sound came. His friends looked away, pretending not to know him. For a moment, Catherine held his gaze, and in that silence, something powerful shifted. She didn't scold him. She didn't call the MPs. She just looked at him, long enough that the weight of his own actions began to crush him from within. Then she said, "Clean this mess." With that, she turned and walked out, leaving behind a cafeteria that might as well have been a courtroom. Lucas stood frozen, staring after her. No one spoke. The clink of a single spoon dropping onto a tray echoed louder than any shout could have. Rizzo muttered under his breath, "Damn, man. What have you done?" Lucas felt his hands trembling. He forced a laugh, but it came out dry and hollow. "Relax, it's fine." But it wasn't fine. He knew it. Everyone knew it. That night, Lucas lay in his bunk, staring at the ceiling. The laughter of the day replayed in his mind, but it no longer felt funny. Her eyes haunted him. Those eyes that didn't get angry, didn't retaliate, just saw him. He turned over restlessly, trying to shake the guilt, but sleep wouldn't come. Meanwhile, across the base, Catherine stood by the window of her temporary quarters, the lights of the harbor shimmering below. She held a report in her hand, a list of disciplinary incidents from the last 6 months. The same names appeared again and again. Lucas Trent was one of them. She sighed softly, setting the paper down. Her expression was calm, but her mind was firm. Tomorrow would be different. The era of carelessness would end, not through rage, but through reckoning. She picked up her phone and dialed. "Colonel Reeves," she said. "Schedule the full assembly for tomorrow morning. All personnel." "Yes, Admiral," came the voice on the other end. As she ended the call, she looked back out the window, her reflection merging with the lights of the ships below. "Respect," she murmured to herself, "isn't taught in words. It's learned through moments." Somewhere in the distance, a horn blared from a departing vessel. The sea was calm, but inside the base, a quiet storm was brewing. And by sunrise, everyone, especially one Sergeant Lucas Trent, would learn exactly who that woman really was. By dawn, the mess hall had gone quiet. The laughter that usually filled the air at breakfast was gone, replaced by whispers and uneasy glances. Something had shifted, though no one could quite say what. Word of the milk incident had spread faster than smoke through the ranks. No official reports had been made, no punishments announced. But every soldier on the base seemed to know that Sergeant Lucas Trent had done something reckless. They just didn't know who he'd done it to. Lucas tried to laugh it off. He walked through the corridors with forced confidence, nodding at people who quickly looked away. "Relax, everyone," he said to a group of recruits who stopped talking when he passed. "You'd think I threw milk on the president the way you're acting." But his words fell flat. No one laughed. When he reached his workstation, Corporal Dean was waiting for him, arms crossed. "You're an idiot, you know that?" he said quietly. Lucas rolled his eyes. "You've been listening to gossip." Dean leaned closer. "Not gossip. I just came from admin. They're cleaning up the personnel files. Someone's being promoted. Someone big. And apparently, there's a new Admiral taking over this week." Lucas frowned. "So what? Happens all the time." Dean's tone dropped to a whisper. "Yeah, but here's the kicker. She's already on base." Lucas froze. "She?" Dean nodded. "That's what I heard." For the first time, Lucas felt something sharp twist in his gut. He tried to brush it off, but the thought hung in his mind like a storm cloud. Across the base, preparations were in motion. The parade ground was being cleaned, flags polished, and ranks inspected. Senior officers barked orders with newfound energy. The air buzzed with nervous excitement and fear. Rumors grew by the hour. Some said the new admiral was a strict disciplinarian, known for reshaping entire commands. Others said she'd come from overseas, a war-zone veteran with zero tolerance for nonsense. A few even whispered she was already among them, observing, testing, silently watching. The mystery made everyone uneasy. In the officers' lounge, Captain Miles, an old friend of Lucas's, poured himself a coffee and muttered, "You hear about the woman in the cafeteria?" The others nodded. "Yeah, I heard she's someone's relative from HQ, maybe connected to command." Another voice chimed in, half joking. "Or maybe she is the new admiral." "That would be poetic justice, huh?" Laughter followed, but only for a second. The joke hung in the air, too close to the truth to be funny. Lucas entered the lounge just in time to catch the end of that conversation. He forced a grin, though his throat felt tight. "You guys and your wild stories," he said. An admiral wouldn't sit with grunts in the cafeteria. "Maybe she would," Captain Miles said quietly, stirring his cup. "Some leaders like to see the truth before anyone knows who they are." The room went still. Lucas didn't respond. He turned and left before anyone could see the flicker of doubt on his face. Outside, the sky had turned gray with gathering clouds. He walked along the pier, the wind sharp and cold. Ships creaked against the ropes, their massive hulls dark against the water. For a moment, he stood there, staring out to sea, trying to calm the churning in his stomach. But he couldn't. Her face kept returning to his mind, that calm, unflinching stare. The way she hadn't shouted. The way her silence had felt heavier than any reprimand. He'd humiliated her, and she hadn't fought back. That kind of control, that poise, it wasn't normal. It was the kind of strength that came from years of command. A thought flashed through his mind, and his stomach dropped. What if the joke's on me? He shook it off, but the feeling lingered. Meanwhile, at the top floor of the command building, Admiral Catherine Howell stood beside the window, overlooking the very same pier. She could see the soldiers below, small figures moving about, busy but anxious. She knew the rumors were spreading. Good. Rumors, she believed, were powerful. They revealed how people handled uncertainty, whether they led with respect or fear. And she wanted to see both before revealing herself. Colonel Reeves entered, holding a clipboard. "Ma'am, the assembly for tomorrow is confirmed. All personnel will be present." "Good," she replied. "And Sergeant Trent?" Reeves hesitated. "Still on base. No disciplinary action taken yet, per your request." Catherine turned to face him, her expression neutral. "Not yet," she said. "He'll learn more from silence than punishment. For now." Reeves nodded and left. Catherine remained by the window, her reflection mirrored in the glass. In her mind, she wasn't thinking of revenge. She was thinking of example. She'd seen arrogance destroy good men before. Soldiers who thought rank made them invincible, until life reminded them otherwise. If she could correct that arrogance here, through one lesson, she could change the culture of the entire base. That evening, as the sun bled orange across the horizon, Lucas sat in the barracks, restless. He was polishing his boots, for once, though he didn't know why. The barracks were quieter than usual. Private Rizzo sat on his bunk, whispering, "Man, you sure she ain't someone big?" Lucas glared. "Drop it. But what if she is?" "I said drop it." The room fell silent. Then softly, Rizzo said, "You don't get it, do you? Everyone's watching you. If she is the new CO, you're done." Lucas slammed his boot down and stood. Enough! The other soldiers went still. Lucas's heart was pounding, his hands trembling. He wasn't used to feeling afraid, but he was. The walls felt smaller, the air thicker. He needed space. He stormed out into the night air, walking until he reached the quiet docks. The moonlight shimmered on the water, the sound of waves filling the silence. For a long moment, he just stood there, the guilt gnawing deeper. Then, behind him, a voice spoke softly. "Beautiful night, isn't it?" He spun around. It was her, Catherine Hall. Even in the dim light, she looked composed, calm, her hands clasped behind her back. Lucas stiffened. "Ma'am, she raised a hand. "At ease, Sergeant. I'm not here to lecture you." He blinked, confused. "You're not?" "No." She looked out at the sea. "You seem like a good soldier. But sometimes, good soldiers forget what respect means." Her tone was even, not angry, almost sorrowful. Lucas swallowed hard. "I made a mistake." She nodded. "We all do. What matters is what you do next." He didn't know what to say. Then, as quietly as she'd appeared, she turned to leave. "Get some rest, Sergeant. Tomorrow will be an important day." She walked away, her silhouette fading into the shadows. Lucas stood frozen, the words echoing in his head. Tomorrow will be an important day. He didn't sleep that night. None of them did. By morning, the base buzzed with tension. Orders came down, full dress uniform, parade formation at 08:00 hours. Every soldier, every officer, every mechanic, everyone was to attend. The courtyard gleamed, flags fluttered, and a polished black car waited at the edge of the field. Lucas stood in formation, beads of sweat forming under his collar. His heart pounded in his chest. His mind screamed that something was coming, something inevitable. As the clock struck 8, the car door opened. A hush fell over the entire base. And when the figure stepped out, tall, composed, in a spotless Admiral's uniform gleaming with medals, Lucas felt the blood drain from his face. It was her, the woman he'd mocked, the woman he'd humiliated, Admiral Catherine Hiley. And as she approached the podium, silence fell so deep that even the sea seemed to hold its breath. Tomorrow had arrived. The sun burned high over the naval base, casting long, sharp shadows across the assembly grounds. Hundreds of soldiers stood at attention, boots aligned perfectly, uniforms pressed to precision. The rhythmic snap of the flags above was the only sound breaking the silence. Then came the echo of heels on concrete. Admiral Catherine Hiley walked toward the podium, her white uniform gleaming under the sun. Rows of medals caught the light, flashing gold and silver. Every movement was deliberate, graceful, the poise of someone who carried both authority and experience. The officers saluted as she passed. The enlisted followed. But for Sergeant Lucas Trent, the world had gone utterly still. Every second since she stepped from that black car had felt like a slow collapse. His heart hammered in his chest, sweat collecting under his collar. The woman he'd mocked, the one he'd poured scalding milk over like some playground bully, was the Admiral now standing in front of them all. And she wasn't just any Admiral. She was his commanding officer. As Catherine reached the podium, she paused for a moment, letting the weight of silence build. Her eyes scanned the rows before her, faces tense, uncertain, expectant. When she spoke, her voice was calm, measured, and powerful. "Good morning." 100 voices answered as one. "Good morning, Admiral." She gave a small nod. At ease. The soldiers shifted slightly, boots relaxing, but no one truly moved. Everyone wanted to hear what she would say, especially after weeks of rumor and mystery. Catherine rested both hands on the podium, her gaze sweeping across the field. "I know many of you have been wondering who your new commanding officer would be," she began. "And I can imagine the rumors that have been circulating. Some of you may have even tried to guess." A few nervous chuckles rippled through the crowd. Her lips curved into the faintest smile. "That's all right. Curiosity is part of human nature. But today, curiosity ends. Today, we begin." Her tone shifted, firm, steady, unyielding. "I've served this nation for 32 years. I've commanded in 3 war zones, led reconstruction efforts after 2 major disasters, and I've seen soldiers rise from impossible odds. But I've also seen how easily respect, the foundation of every military unit, can be eroded by arrogance, carelessness, or pride." Lucas's stomach twisted. He could feel the words cutting straight through him. Catherine paused, letting her words linger. "2 days ago, I arrived on this base unannounced. I wanted to see how my new command operated, not from reports or briefings, but from the ground level. I wanted to see how you treat one another when rank and reputation are not in the room." Every soldier's eyes widened. Heads turned slightly. Whispered gasps broke through the stillness. Lucas's throat went dry. Catherine continued, her expression unreadable. "What I witnessed was revealing. Most of you are courteous, disciplined, and professional. You represent what our Navy stands for. But I also witnessed something else. A small act that said much more than any performance could." She paused again, scanning the crowd slowly, deliberately. And then her eyes landed on him. Lucas froze. He could barely breathe. "In the mess hall," she said softly, "a soldier, in a moment of carelessness and disrespect, chose to humiliate a fellow service member for amusement. He did so without knowing who that person was, without considering what it said about his character." Silence fell like a physical weight. Even the wind seemed to stop. Catherine stepped out from behind the podium. "To that soldier, I have this to say. Rank does not protect you from accountability, and power does not excuse cruelty." Every word landed like a hammer. Lucas's face burned with shame. He wanted to vanish, to sink into the concrete beneath his boots. He could feel hundreds of eyes shifting toward him, some sympathetic, others angry, a few disappointed. But Catherine didn't call his name. She didn't point him out. That somehow made it worse. Her voice softened. "However, mistakes are part of being human. What defines us is how we respond once we realize the damage we've done." She turned back to the crowd. "In this command, respect will not be optional. It will not depend on gender, rank, or background. You will show it because it's what keeps this organization alive. You will give it because that is how you earn it." Her tone grew quieter, but sharper, each word deliberate. "I don't demand perfection. I demand integrity." A murmur of agreement ran through the ranks. The air, once heavy with tension, began to shift, from fear to something else. Respect. Catherine walked back to the podium. "We will begin new drills next week. I expect full participation and accountability. No shortcuts, no excuses. If you give me your effort, I'll give you my trust." She looked once more toward Lucas. "And for those who've stumbled, you will have the chance to rise again." It took all of Lucas's strength not to break formation. His chest ached with regret, his throat burning with the words he couldn't speak. When the assembly was dismissed, the soldiers erupted into conversation, whispers and awe mixing in the air. "Did you hear that?" One said. "She was talking about him. Man, if I were him, I'd transfer out tomorrow." "No way, she didn't humiliate him. She's giving him a chance." Lucas didn't hear the rest. He just stood there, motionless, staring at the podium long after Catherine had left. Captain Miles approached slowly. "You all right?" Lucas didn't respond. Miles sighed. She could have destroyed you in front of everyone, Trent. But she didn't. That means something. Lucas nodded faintly, but his voice cracked when he spoke. Yeah, it means I owe her more than an apology. That afternoon, he stood outside her office door for almost 20 minutes before knocking. Enter, came her voice. He stepped in, spine straight, eyes down. Catherine sat behind her desk, reviewing documents, her reading glasses perched low on her nose. He saluted. Ma'am. She looked up. Sergeant Trent. He swallowed hard. I came to apologize. For what I did. There's no excuse for it. You had every right to. She raised a hand, cutting him off gently. You already said the most important word, Sergeant. He blinked. Which word? Apologize. She leaned back in her chair. I don't need a speech. I need to know that you've learned something. Lucas hesitated. Then, slowly, he said, I learned that respect isn't just about following orders. It's about recognizing the person next to you as someone who deserves dignity, no matter who they are. A faint smile touched her lips. Good answer. He exhaled, relief flooding through him. She stood, walking around her desk. Sergeant, I'm not here to ruin your career. You made a mistake. But how you move forward will define what kind of man and soldier you become. He nodded. Yes, ma'am. She extended her hand. Then let's start over. He hesitated for half a second before shaking it. Her grip was firm, steady, strong, forgiving. Tomorrow, she said, I want you leading the morning drills. Show your unit what respect looks like in action. His eyes widened. Me? Yes, you, she said simply. Prove that lesson learned is a lesson shared. Lucas left the office feeling both humbled and determined. For the first time in years, he felt something deeper than pride, purpose. Outside, the wind off the ocean carried the sound of distant waves and the faint cry of seagulls. He paused, looking back at the command building where the woman he'd wronged had just given him a second chance. He clenched his jaw and whispered to himself, I won't waste it. Far above, from her window, Admiral Hale watched him go. She saw the change in his posture, the way guilt had turned into resolve. Her expression softened. Good, she murmured. He's starting to understand. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, the base felt different, steadier, more alive. Something had shifted in its heart. The storm had passed. But the real test of leadership, redemption, and respect had only just begun. The following morning broke with a cold wind sweeping across the naval base. The ocean was rough, waves crashing hard against the concrete piers. The sun had barely risen when the loudspeakers crackled to life, announcing the beginning of Operation Resolve, the first major training drill under Admiral Catherine Hale's command. Every soldier on base knew this was no ordinary exercise. The Admiral herself had designed it. It would test coordination, endurance, discipline, and most of all, teamwork. But for Sergeant Lucas Trent, the day meant something more. It was his chance to redeem himself. By 0600 hours, hundreds of troops assembled on the main training field. The air smelled of salt and anticipation. In the distance, Admiral Hall watched from the observation platform, flanked by her staff officers. Down below, Lucas stood before his unit, Alpha Squad, 10 men, all veterans of countless drills, but now looking at him with mixed expressions. Some trusted him. Others didn't. One, a tall corporal named Vega, spoke up first. You sure you're the right guy for this, Sarge? Word is, the Admiral gave you this to test if you'd crack. Lucas met his gaze evenly. Maybe she did. But either way, we're going to win this. Vega snorted. We'll see. Lucas ignored the sarcasm and raised his voice. All right, listen up. This drill isn't about speed. It's about precision, communication, and respect. We move as one, no ego, no shortcuts. Anyone got a problem with that? The silence was thick. Good, Lucas said. Let's move. The first phase of the drill was a logistics challenge, transporting heavy equipment across rough terrain to simulate a disaster relief operation. The field was muddy from overnight rain, and the wind whipped sand into their faces. Keep the straps tight, Lucas shouted over the gusts. Don't fight the mud, work with it. He was in the dirt alongside them, pushing, pulling, lifting. His uniform was soaked, his boots caked in sludge. But unlike before, there was no arrogance in his tone, only steady determination. Corporal Vega, watching him, muttered to Private Rizzo, "Guy's really trying, huh?" Rizzo nodded. "Can't fake that." Hours passed. One by one, teams began to fall behind, their coordination faltering. But Alpha Squad held formation. Lucas moved like a man possessed, driving his team forward not with anger, but with example. When a recruit slipped and fell, he was the first to pull him up. When a crate broke open, he was the first to repack it. From the observation platform, Admiral Halle watched silently, her arms folded. Colonel Reeves stood beside her. "Quite a turnaround," Reeves said. "Didn't think the man had it in him." Catherine's eyes didn't leave the field. "Everyone has it in them," she said softly. "Most just need a reason to remember why they serve." By midday, the second phase began, a navigation course through dense woodland, designed to simulate night operations. Compass readings, silent signals, and endurance were everything. Lucas took point, reading maps with precision, but it wasn't easy. Tensions flared among the men as fatigue set in. At one point, Vega stopped abruptly. "We're off course," he snapped. "We were supposed to hit marker Delta 15 minutes ago." Lucas frowned. "Trust me, the trail bends east. It's longer but safer." "Safer?" Vega scoffed. "You're just trying to play it cautious so you don't mess up again." Rizzo stepped in. "Vega, enough." But Vega wasn't done. "No, let's hear him explain why he gets to lead us after embarrassing the entire base." Lucas inhaled slowly, forcing himself to stay calm. "Because leadership isn't about who's perfect. It's about who's willing to take responsibility when things go wrong. Now, if you've got a better route, speak up, but make sure it gets us all home alive." For a moment, the woods were silent, except for the rustle of wind through the branches. Then Vega looked away, muttering, "Fine, lead on." Lucas gave a short nod and moved ahead. Hours later, Alpha Squad emerged from the trees, exhausted but intact. The final checkpoint awaited, a communication relay test near the coastline, where teams had to build a working field antenna and establish contact with command. The sea roared nearby, and dark clouds gathered overhead. Lucas assigned positions, working alongside his men instead of barking orders. Rizzo set up the signal feed. "Vega, help me secure the mast." As they worked, thunder rumbled in the distance. Rain began to pour, soaking everything. The antenna slipped, the cables tangled, and the men started shouting over one another. Lucas raised his voice. "Quiet, one voice at a time." "Rizzo, talk to me. What's the signal strength?" "Fluctuating." Rizzo shouted. "We're losing power on the backup." Lucas gritted his teeth. "Then we make it manual." "Vega, brace the pole. I'll climb." "What?" "You'll get fried if it shorts." "Then you hold it steady." Without hesitation, Lucas scaled the slippery metal frame, rain pelting his face. He reached the top, adjusted the antenna, and connected the last wire manually. Sparks snapped, but the green light flickered on. "Signal active," Rizzo yelled. The comms device crackled, and a voice from command came through. Alpha Squad relay confirmed. You're the first team to complete the course. Well done. Cheers erupted through the group. Exhausted, muddy, soaked soldiers laughing and shouting in triumph. And for the first time in weeks, Lucas smiled. A real smile. From the observation platform, Admiral Hawley lowered her binoculars, her expression unreadable. Reeves turned to her. That was a hell of a turnaround, ma'am. She nodded slowly. Redemption doesn't happen in words, Colonel. It happens when no one's looking, and he just proved it. Should I log his commendation? Reeves asked. Not yet, she said. Let him earn it from his men first. Later that evening, after debrief, Alpha Squad sat by the docks. The rain had stopped, and the sunset cast a crimson glow over the water. They were quiet, tired, proud, reflective. Vega broke the silence. I was wrong about you, Sarge. Lucas looked at him. You weren't wrong. You just saw the worst of me. Today, I tried to show the other side. Vega nodded. Well, you did. We followed you because you didn't just tell us what to do. You showed us. Lucas smiled faintly. Then maybe we're finally a team. As the men laughed softly, the sound of footsteps approached from behind. They turned and saw Admiral Hawley. Instantly, everyone stood to attention. At ease, she said gently. You've earned that much. She looked around at the muddy, exhausted faces and gave a small, approving nod. Alpha Squad, top scores in every section. Coordination, endurance, initiative. Well done. Thank you, ma'am, Lucas said quietly. She turned her gaze on him. You led with humility today, Sergeant. That's a rare thing. He lowered his head. You gave me the chance, ma'am. I just didn't want to waste it. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then softly, keep leading like this, and others will follow not because they have to, but because they want to. With that, she turned and walked away, the fading light glinting off her insignia. Lucas watched her go, the wind tugging at his damp uniform. Rizzo elbowed him lightly. You think she forgave you? Lucas smiled, staring out over the sea. No, I think she expects more of me now. Far above, from her office window, Catherine watched the squad below, laughing, talking, alive with pride. For the first time since taking command, she allowed herself a quiet smile. One act of cruelty turned into a lesson for an entire base, she whispered. That's how change begins. The base lights flickered on as night descended. The waves crashed softly against the pier, the air alive with renewed spirit. Sergeant Lucas Trent had begun his redemption, not through apology, but through action. And deep down, Admiral Hawley knew this was only the beginning. The next week brought a storm far beyond the weather. Inside the polished offices of Naval Command, whispers of dissent floated through the corridors like smoke. The news from Norfolk Base had reached headquarters. The story of a new admiral taking command in an unconventional way, letting a soldier humiliate himself only to redeem him later. Not everyone appreciated her methods. Vice Admiral Harrison paced in his corner office, fingers tapping the polished oak desk. Colonel Reeves, this is unacceptable, he said, his voice low but firm. She's undermining authority by letting mistakes go unchecked. This is not how discipline works. Reeves, uncomfortable but loyal, spoke carefully. Sir, she isn't ignoring mistakes. She's using them as lessons. Morale is improving, efficiency is up, and even Sergeant Trent, the one involved in that incident, has transformed remarkably. Harrison slammed his hand on the desk. Morale isn't the point. We have rules, procedures, protocol. A soldier throws milk on an officer and nothing happens? That's anarchy. Reeves shifted uneasily. With all due respect, Admiral Hawley has decades of experience. Her approach? Unconventional, yes, but effective. Harrison shook his head. We'll see how effective it is when the chain of command is challenged in the field. Keep me updated. Meanwhile, at Norfolk, Catherine Hawley moved through the base with her usual precision. But the news from headquarters weighed on her. The whispers of scrutiny, the subtle resistance from some senior officers. She understood it perfectly. She was a woman in a position historically dominated by tradition, and her methods challenged ingrained habits. She didn't flinch. Leadership had always demanded patience and resolve, and she had both in abundance. In her office, she reviewed the upcoming schedule for fleet readiness drills, ensuring every squad would be accountable, every procedure observed. Her eyes flickered to Lucas's file. Sergeant Trent had exceeded expectations during the first redemption drills. But she knew the true test would come when decisions were made under pressure, when the illusion of safety vanished and real stakes emerged. She summoned him to her office. Lucas entered, standing rigidly at attention. "Ma'am?" "At ease, Sergeant," Catherine said, gesturing to a chair. "Sit," Lucas complied, eyes sharp. "Yes, ma'am." She studied him for a moment. "You did well last week. Alpha Squad performed admirably under challenging circumstances. But I need to know. If things go wrong, if my command is questioned, if higher-ups come down on me, will you follow through? Will you support your unit and me without hesitation?" Lucas's jaw tightened. "Ma'am, I won't just follow. I'll lead alongside you. I've learned my lesson. Humiliation doesn't teach. Action does. And I won't fail again." Catherine leaned back, her gaze steady. "Good. I don't need blind loyalty, Sergeant. I need judgment, courage, and initiative. That's what real command requires." He nodded. "Understood, ma'am." The very next day, headquarters dispatched Inspector General Matthews to Norfolk to evaluate Admiral Hale's methods. Rumors of discontent and unorthodox discipline had reached the top brass, and they wanted answers, fast. Lucas learned of the inspector's arrival while supervising Alpha Squad. He immediately understood the challenge. This was the ultimate test, not of drills, not of teamwork, but of loyalty, courage, and character. The inspector arrived sharply at 0800 hours. Matthews was a tall, intimidating man with hawk-like eyes that missed nothing. His presence alone sent ripples of unease through the base. "Admiral Hall," Matthews said curtly, "I've heard reports of unconventional leadership here. I expect answers." Catherine nodded calmly. "Of course. We'll conduct a full review of operations and personnel performance." Lucas watched as she remained composed, addressing each concern without defensiveness, her confidence unshaken. But he also noticed the tension in the ranks, some officers whispering, some skeptical glances directed at the Admiral. He felt a surge of protectiveness. Hours later, Matthews accompanied Catherine onto the training grounds for a live evaluation of Alpha Squad. The sergeant led the unit through a simulated, tactical exercise, where split-second decisions could determine success or failure. The squad moved with precision, but halfway through, an unexpected obstacle was introduced, a collapsed communication line simulated by the drill instructors. Instantly, confusion rippled through the unit. "Alpha Squad, adjust positions. Re-establish line manually." Lucas shouted. Rizzo hesitated. "But it's impossible. We need the signal." Lucas squared his shoulders. "Then we make it possible." He climbed the muddy embankment, manually connecting wires while shouting orders to the team. Every move he made was precise, calm, and authoritative. He didn't just follow instructions. He innovated under pressure. Catherine observed silently from above, satisfied. Matthews, however, narrowed his eyes. After the drill, Matthews requested a private meeting with Catherine. "Admiral, your methods are unorthodox. We cannot condone them without oversight. There's a risk this approach will create more problems than it solves." Catherine remained composed. "Inspector, the results speak for themselves. Morale is high. Alpha Squad's performance today exceeded expectations. Sergeant Trent's leadership shows that accountability and empowerment produce stronger soldiers than fear or humiliation ever could." Matthew's gaze sharpened. "You are risking the chain of command. One misstep and the consequences could be severe." Catherine's voice remained even, firm. "I understand the risks, but I also understand my responsibility. Leadership isn't about avoiding mistakes. It's about preparing soldiers to act when mistakes happen. And Sergeant Trent's actions today prove that my methods are working." Meanwhile, Lucas watched from the sidelines, heart pounding. He knew this was the moment where he had to demonstrate true loyalty. After Matthews left, Catherine approached him quietly. "Sergeant Trent, what you did today, your calm, decisive action under pressure, was exemplary. But remember, loyalty isn't blind obedience. It's knowing the mission, understanding the stakes, and acting with integrity even when no one is watching." Lucas nodded. "I understand, ma'am. I'll do whatever it takes to protect this unit and the command." Her eyes softened slightly. "Good. That's why you were given the chance to lead. Not for punishment, not for redemption alone, but to prepare you to be a soldier who inspires others." That evening, Lucas returned to Alpha Squad's barracks. The men greeted him with quiet respect, some even with smiles, a stark contrast to the suspicion of a week prior. Vega approached him, hand extended. "Sergeant, you earned this. Today, we followed you because we wanted to." Lucas took the hand, nodding. "We followed together. That's what matters." As the squad settled for the night, Lucas gazed out the window at the base lights reflecting off the harbor. Admiral Hale's words echoed in his mind. Loyalty isn't blind obedience. It's integrity under pressure. He realized that he had begun to understand not only what leadership meant, but also the weight of the trust she had placed in him. And he knew that more challenges were coming, both from within the base and from higher command. High above, Catherine Hollow stood in her office, reviewing the day's reports. She allowed herself a brief moment of satisfaction. The base was beginning to change. Soldiers were beginning to learn that discipline and respect came from example, not fear. But she also knew the greater challenge was still ahead. Leadership at Norfolk Base had begun, but it would be tested by higher command, by unexpected crises, and by the stubbornness of human nature. And she would face it all with her usual composure. The night settled over the base, waves crashing gently against the docks. Lucas Trent lay awake in his bunk, thinking about the day's events. He was no longer the arrogant soldier who had thrown milk thoughtlessly. He was a man who had faced consequences, learned humility, and earned trust. And deep down, he knew the real challenge, both for him and for Admiral Hull, was just beginning. The early morning fog blanketed Norfolk Base like a thick, gray shroud. Normally, a mist rolling off the harbor lent a serene calm to the piers and training grounds. But today, it carried a sense of foreboding. The ships creaked against their moorings, foghorns echoed faintly, and the soldiers moving through the compound sensed a tension they could not name. Lucas Trent was finishing his morning inspection of Alpha Squad when the first alarm blared, a high-pitched, mechanical wail that sent chills down spines. "Red alert! Red alert!" The intercom repeated. Lucas' heart raced. He sprinted toward the command building, adrenaline surging through his veins. Alpha Squad followed, boots pounding against the wet concrete. At the entrance to the operations room, Admiral Catherine High was already directing personnel. Her voice cut through the chaos, calm but commanding. "Status report," she barked. Lieutenant Simmons hunched over a radar console, looked up. "Ma'am, multiple reports of unauthorized vessels approaching the harbor. They're moving fast, and their transponders are off. Unknown origin." Catherine's eyes narrowed. "Potential threat?" "High probability, ma'am," Simmons replied. "They're attempting to breach perimeter defenses." Catherine took a deep breath, her expression composed yet intense. "Deploy security teams immediately. Lock down all entry points. Alpha Squad, with Sergeant Trent in lead, you're assigned to the eastern docks. Ensure no breach. Any vessel attempting entry is to be intercepted. Move." Lucas felt the weight of responsibility settle on him like a physical load. This was no drill, no hypothetical scenario. This was real, a test not only of his skill, but of his ability to lead under pressure. "Yes, ma'am," he shouted, motioning for his squad to follow. As they reached the eastern docks, the fog thickened, visibility dropping to mere meters. Lucas positioned his men strategically, scanning the water. Every shadow, every ripple, could hide a potential threat. "Keep coms tight," Lucas ordered. "Eyes forward, weapons ready. Any suspicious movement, we report immediately." The squad moved silently, tension crackling in the air like static. Even Vega, once skeptical of Lucas' leadership, now followed his orders without question. The transformation in the squad mirrored the transformation in Lucas himself, from impulsive, reckless soldier to measured, decisive leader. Then came the first sign of movement. Dark shapes cut through the mist, approaching the pier at high speed. Small boats, heavily armed, glinting with steel in the faint light. "Contact! Target at 12 o'clock!" Rizzo yelled. Lucas immediately assessed the situation. "Vega, flank left. Carter, hold center. Dean, cover right. Maintain formation. Don't engage until I give the order." The boats accelerated, engines cutting through the fog like knives. It was clear they weren't fishing vessels. Their intent was aggressive. Lucas clenched his jaw. This was the moment Admiral Hawley had warned him about. Real stakes, real responsibility, and the lives of his men hanging on every decision. He raised his hand. "Engage defensive protocol. Signal all ships. Notify Admiral Hawley." Back in the command room, Catherine coordinated multiple units with surgical precision. Her voice was calm, but her mind was a storm of calculations. She monitored the radar, communicated with patrol boats, and issued commands with authority. "Security teams, intercept east side," she instructed. "Do not let any vessel reach the harbor. Maintain formation and report all activity immediately." Colonel Reeves, standing beside her, noted, "She's controlling this like a battlefield veteran, Num. Even under pressure, she's composed." Catherine didn't respond verbally. She simply adjusted the frequencies on her headset, eyes scanning, waiting. The first hostile boat reached the eastern dock. Lucas barked commands, his voice cutting through the fog. "Engage defensive perimeter. Non-lethal first. Warn them off." Shots were fired across the water, flares lit the mist, and loudspeakers warned the intruders to halt. The boat slowed slightly, but did not retreat. Lucas' mind raced. He had trained for exercises like this, but this was reality, unpredictable, chaotic, dangerous. His squad had to act together, or disaster would strike. "Dean, disable the lead vessel's engine with grappling hooks," he shouted. "Rizzo, flank right and cover. Vega, maintain left." They moved like a single unit, every command executed with precision. Lucas coordinated each movement while keeping the squad safe. Meanwhile, Catherine monitored from the platform. She saw Lucas' strategy in action, and allowed herself a small nod of approval. He wasn't just following orders. He was thinking critically, adapting to circumstances, and maintaining control over both his squad and the situation. Colonel Reeves leaned close. "He's handling it exactly like you said he would. You trusted him, and he's rising to the challenge." Catherine's eyes remained fixed on the water. Leadership isn't about rank. It's about judgment under pressure. He's proving that today. The battle at the docks escalated. 2 of the intruder vessels attempted to ram the pier, forcing Lucas to make split-second decisions. "Vega, cut off the left flank. Carter, right. Dean, support me in the center." The squad executed flawlessly, using nets, barriers, and non-lethal deterrents to redirect the hostile boats. Sparks flew as a boat scraped against the dock, but no one was injured. The fog seemed alive, twisting and turning around them, making every move feel surreal. Lucas felt a surge of pride, not in himself, but in his men. They trusted him, and he trusted them. That bond, forged through redemption drills and guidance, was now their shield. Finally, the intruders retreated, realizing the harbor was secure. The warning flares and precise countermeasures had worked. Alpha Squad regrouped, soaked, exhausted, but victorious. Lucas fell to his knees, gasping for breath, as the fog began to lift. Behind him, the squad offered nods of respect, quiet acknowledgement of a mission accomplished. Back in the command room, Catherine exhaled deeply. She had monitored every move, every decision. It had been tense, demanding, and high risk. But the base had held, and the leadership she had nurtured, especially in Lucas, had proven its worth. Colonel Reeves approached cautiously. "Admiral, the intruders have retreated. You and your team handled this perfectly. The base is secure." Catherine's gaze softened as she looked out the window. "Not perfectly, Colonel, but close enough to demonstrate that preparation, respect, and decisive action work. The lesson here is more than strategy. It's trust, responsibility, and courage under fire." Reeves nodded. "And Lucas?" She allowed a faint smile. "He's no longer just a soldier. He's a leader." That evening, as the base began recovery operations and soldiers tended to equipment and minor injuries, Lucas walked to the observation deck. Admiral Hawley was there, silhouetted against the twilight sky. "Ma'am," he said quietly. She turned. "Sergeant Trent, you performed exceptionally. Today, you led under pressure. You protected your men and upheld the command. That's what I hoped you'd learn, and more." Lucas' voice trembled slightly. "I didn't do it for praise. I did it because it was the right thing, and because you trusted me." Catherine's eyes softened, her calm authority unwavering. "Trust is earned, Lucas, and you've earned it today. Remember this moment. This is the kind of test that shapes a soldier into a leader. You didn't just save the base. You proved what we're capable of when we act with integrity." Lucas nodded, feeling a mix of exhaustion, pride, and humility. The events of the past week, from humiliation to redemption to crisis, had reshaped him in ways he could never have imagined. The fog had lifted. The base was safe. And for the first time, Lucas truly understood the weight and meaning of true leadership. Above them, the stars reflected on the harbor water, serene and eternal. And in the quiet that followed the storm, both mentor and soldier knew that this was just the beginning of a legacy, a lesson in respect, courage, and unwavering duty. The morning after the crisis dawned crisp and clear. Sunlight glinted off the calm waters of Norfolk Harbor, reflecting a serenity that belied the chaos of the previous day. The base hummed with quiet activity as soldiers repaired equipment, checked vessels, and organized logs. Yet beneath the routine, a subtle transformation had taken place, one visible to anyone paying close attention. Sergeant Lucas Trent walked through the training grounds, his uniform damp from yesterday's storm, but immaculate, bearing the unmistakable weight of earned authority. Soldiers who had once doubted him now fell in line with respect and trust rather than fear. He had earned their loyalty through action, not position. "Morning, Sarge," Rizzo said, handing him a wet rag to clean the mud from his boots. "Morning," Lucas replied, his voice calm, measured. The sound of genuine camaraderie filled the space between them. Vega, once the most skeptical of his squad, approached with a nod. "You did good yesterday." Everyone saw it. Everyone respects it. Lucas merely nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "We all did good. Don't forget that." Meanwhile, in her office overlooking the harbor, Admiral Catherine Howell observed the base. Her presence, once a source of quiet tension, now radiated stability and inspiration. The soldiers moved with precision, respect, and purpose, not because they feared punishment, but because they had learned the value of discipline, guided by fairness. Colonel Reeves entered quietly, leaning against the doorframe. "Ma'am, the reports are coming in." Every squad passed the after-action checks. "Morale is at an all-time high, and Sergeant Trent has been recommended for recognition by multiple units." Catherine turned her gaze toward him, eyes steady. "Recognition is not given lightly, Reeves. He's earned it through leadership, not just performance." Reeves nodded. "I'd say he's ready for more responsibility." "Perhaps," Catherine replied softly. Her mind was already thinking several steps ahead about succession planning, the cultivation of leadership across the base, and the subtle ripple effect of one soldier's growth. At the afternoon assembly, the entire base gathered on the parade ground. Flags fluttered in the gentle breeze, the sunlight highlighting the polished boots and crisp uniforms. The officers stood at attention while enlisted men and women waited, murmuring quietly among themselves. Today was different. There was a shared sense of pride and accomplishment, a quiet acknowledgement of a storm weathered together. Catherine approached the podium. The murmurs died down instantly, replaced by a profound stillness. "Yesterday," she began, "we faced an unexpected crisis. It tested not only our training and readiness, but also our character. How we responded under pressure revealed who we are, and what kind of command we uphold." Her eyes scanned the crowd, resting briefly on Lucas. He stood straight, composed, shoulders squared, a silent testament to his journey. "Sergeant Lucas Trent," she continued, led his unit with integrity, courage, and decisive judgment. He faced challenges head-on, prioritized the safety and cohesion of his team, and emerged not just as a soldier, but as a leader. Applause erupted, echoing across the harbor. Soldiers clapped, cheered, and exchanged glances of respect. Lucas bowed his head slightly, not in vanity, but in acknowledgement of a moment he would never forget. Catherine's voice softened. "Leadership is not about rank, medals, or titles. It is about trust, respect, and the ability to inspire others to rise above fear and complacency. Every one of you demonstrated that yesterday, and the foundation we've built here of accountability, integrity, and mutual respect will endure." Later, in the quiet of the mess hall, Lucas sat with Alpha Squad. For the first time, the room felt relaxed, almost familial. Laughter bubbled between them, not mocking, but warm and genuine. Vega clapped him on the back. "You know, I doubted you." "Not anymore." Lucas chuckled softly. "I doubted myself more than anyone else did. But yesterday reminded me, leadership isn't about never making mistakes. It's about learning from them and guiding others in the process." Rizzo nodded, his eyes serious. "You earned your place, Sarge. We all learned from you." Lucas felt a swell of emotion. Pride, yes, but also humility. He had been humiliated, challenged, and tested, and through it, he had grown. As evening fell, Lucas walked the pier alone, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The water glimmered in reds and golds, waves lapping gently against the hulls of docked ships. For a moment, he allowed himself to reflect. He had once acted impulsively, disregarding consequences, laughing off the seriousness of rank and respect. That arrogance had nearly cost him his dignity and reputation. But under Admiral Hale's guidance, he had learned something far greater. True leadership is earned through courage, integrity, and the willingness to take responsibility for one's actions. A soft voice interrupted his thoughts. "You've come a long way, Sergeant." He turned to see Catherine Howell standing nearby, hands clasped behind her back. The sun illuminated her face, calm and resolute. "Ma'am," Lucas said, snapping to attention. "Relax, Trent. You've earned a moment." She paused, eyes sweeping over the harbor. "I watched you yesterday. Not just your decisions, but your composure, your ability to inspire those around you. That's leadership in its truest form." Lucas swallowed hard. "Thank you, ma'am. I couldn't have done it without your guidance." She smiled faintly. "Guidance is one thing, but you made the choice to rise. That's what matters. Remember that." In the following days, Admiral Hale implemented subtle reforms across the base. Training routines were adjusted to emphasize teamwork and decision-making. Mentorship programs paired experienced officers with young recruits. Reports from higher command, initially skeptical of her methods, began to reflect measurable improvements in morale, efficiency, and readiness. Lucas Trent, now a figure of respect among his peers, was formally recognized with a commendation for bravery, initiative, and exemplary leadership under pressure. He received it not for avoiding mistakes, but for embracing them and growing stronger. Standing at attention during the ceremony, he felt a sense of closure and a beginning. The journey from humiliation to redemption, from arrogance to leadership, had transformed him completely. Admiral Hale presented the award personally, her gaze calm yet proud. "Sergeant Trent, your actions remind us all that true leadership is forged in challenge, humility, and responsibility. Wear this not as a badge of honor alone, but as a reminder of what you are capable of when you act with integrity." Lucas bowed deeply. "I will, ma'am. I promise." Months later, the base was unrecognizable to those who remembered its prior tension. Soldiers moved with purpose, respect permeated every corner, and cohesion was stronger than ever. The lessons learned during the milk incident, the redemption drills, and the emergency crisis had solidified a culture of respect and accountability. Lucas, now promoted to staff sergeant, continued to mentor Alpha Squad. He trained not only for skill and precision, but for character, instilling the same values Admiral Hale had shown him. Catherine Hale observed quietly, from her office window, the base thriving under the principles she had cultivated. She knew leadership was a legacy, one passed down not through rank alone, but through example, mentorship, and trust. And in Lucas Trent, she had found a living testament to that legacy. One evening, as the sun set over Norfolk Harbor, Lucas and Admiral Hale stood on the observation deck together. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "thank you for everything." She looked at him, calm and composed. "No, Sergeant. Thank you. You took the lessons, applied them, and became the leader you were meant to be. That's what makes a legacy, not mistakes avoided, but lessons learned and shared." He nodded, gazing out over the harbor. "I'll make sure it continues." Catherine's lips curved into a faint smile. "I know you will. And one day, someone will look to you as I look to you, learning that respect. Integrity and courage matter more than rank or medals." Lucas exhaled, feeling the weight of responsibility, balanced by a profound sense of purpose. The storm of his past had passed, leaving him stronger, wiser, and prepared to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Above, the stars sparkled over Norfolk Harbor, reflected in the calm water. The base was alive with pride, respect, and resilience. A legacy of respect had been established, and it would endure.